What's the secret to great leadership these days? I'm Pinchas Taylor, and this is Taylor Talks. Welcome, everybody. We are very lucky, very fortunate to be joined by Governor Sununu of New Hampshire. He's going to be speaking with us today about leadership and maybe some of the ways in which faith plays a role in leadership. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Oh, you bet. No, it's a great opportunity. I think we met October, like last fall. I forget the exact date. Right. We were out at the convention and the conference, which was really great. First time I had ever been out there with that kind of crowd, and it allowed me to kind of engage a little bit with the Jewish community and folks that I had never met before. And again, I don't read speeches really. I just kind of go out and talk and more have a discussion. But man, that was a good time. And so when you and I met, I said, well, this is a guy I connect with pretty well. So, I think it's great just having realistic voices out there talking about and where you're focusing, right? What is grounding us, right? What's real in life? So much of what we see in the political world and all that isn't even real. It's an argument as opposed to what's really affecting our families, what's going on across our kitchen table, what's going on in our faith, in our community, because at the end of the day, those are real tangible things that impact us more than anything else.
Absolutely. That is what it's really about. So you come from, if I'm not mistaken, a pretty political family. Your father, I think, was chief of staff in George H.W. Bush's White House. I think your brother was also a senator for the state of New Hampshire. Your current sitting governor of New Hampshire. Was going into politics, going into leadership in general, was that something that was just sort of what you did because that was where your family was at? Or was there like a moment or something that drew you in that direction?
Yeah, no, I never imagined going into politics. So New Hampshire's a bit different, right? We're very locally controlled here. So if we have 400 members of our legislature that represent 1.4 million people and they get paid $100 a year. So it's really a volunteer legislative government, the most representative government you'll find in the country, given its ratios. Most of our taxes, most of our control, what happens in our schools and our communities is all driven at town meeting and a very local level. So the reason I say that is our system here is very unique, which drives a lot of local involvement. And whether it's on the planning board or the school board or the zoning board or running for the state legislature, which frankly, you can have $50 in your pocket, go to Kinko's, make a bunch of copies, knock on a whole bunch of doors, you're going to get elected. That's the way it works. Yeah. It just is. I come from a big family, 10 of us. I had 7 brothers and sisters, my mom and my dad. And people think my dad got me into politics, which not at all. My mom was the first one to get elected to the school board, right? And she'd bring me to the school board meetings and I'd be coloring in the corner, to kind of keep me busy. And it was all about giving back. 3 of us, my dad was governor and then the White House chief of staff. My brother was a congressman and a U.S. senator, and now I'm governor. 3 of the 10 of us entered politics. That's like below average in New Hampshire. Most families, like 50, 60% of the family will enter some sort of political realm, either run for something themselves. Yeah, it's just, and at all different levels. So, no, this was kind of par for the course. And because my dad was in government and all that, I was kind of not against it, but it wasn't my path. I was an environmental engineer. I was outside, I was cleaning up hazardous waste sites, really contaminated waste sites and redeveloping them. Then I ran a ski resort. And it wasn't until, education was always very big in my family. And when my kids started going to the public schools of New Hampshire, like I did, I'm the first governor in 25 years to come up through the public schools in my own state. Kind of weird, but the schools just weren't the same. There was something a little different. At the time, Common Core was very big and standardized testing, and teachers weren't liking it too much. It was a lot of conflict in the classroom. I was running my own business. I had put a group of investors together, and I was running a ski resort. Whole different story. But I realized in the live free or die state, that's our motto, we're very proud of it, there was a lot of regulation. And I take pride in the fact we followed every rule and we did everything by the book. And even then, it was still very, very difficult. And I thought, the live free or die state is becoming a little too much like everybody else. And so I started getting involved. I ran for an office. I convinced my wife to let me to run for a smaller office called the Executive Council. There are 5 executive counselors in the state. I represent about 250,000 people and work closely with the governor on contracts and nominations, things like that. And then in 2016, I decided, I again wasn't happy with the governor at the time, and decided to run against her. She later ran for the U.S. Senate, who's now Senator Hassan. It became an open race, and I won in 2016 by 2%. Which at the time was a landslide. Every other race was by about 1,000 votes in the state. And I'm in my third term right now. I'm running for my 4th term. I'm in New Hampshire, complete accountability to the people. I have to get elected every 2 years, right? We're one of the only states in the country where you have to get elected every 2 years, because if you're doing your job and you're living to the accountability and the standards that you set and you're meeting your goals, you can get reelected. And if you're not, they're going to fire you. And that's actually how it should be. Campaigns are hard. I mean, campaigns are really hard. Don't get me wrong. I'd love if I only had to run once every 4 years. But as a state, we're much better off with a system of accountability where we can turn everybody over every 2, if need be. And so it holds our elected officials accountable. So that's kind of I apologize for the long story, but that's kind of how I didn't imagine I would get there. But it was as a dad and a business owner where I said, you know what? You got to give back. And I was more an executive. That's where my leadership, I think, excels a little bit in terms of being able to make decisions and team building and collaboration and all of that. And I ran in a pretty tough primary in 2016, got through that, won the general, and the rest is history.
That's a very cool story. One of the things I was sharing with you, and I think this was something we had talked about when we first met last year, was, first of all, I'm very drawn to your genuineness, that usually politics is about trying to acquire power and money. That's like what really undergirds a politician's drive. But one of the things I was was kind of attractive was, hey, here's a guy who's just really just telling it like it is, and this is who I am. And so when we had last talked, I know there was a lot of talk amongst the political world that Chris Sununu should run for Senate in New Hampshire. And I was very interested by the fact that you kind of stepped away from that, because you didn't really the whole point wasn't just to be part of some gridlock system up in Washington and away from your state. You wanted to be hands-on. You said executive is part of your leadership. That's where you really excel. So how do we kind of end this gridlock in Washington and this? I mean, it's really, partisan politics is really toxic at this point. Someone who's a genuine leader like yourself, what's your view on all that?
Well, a couple things. So first on the hows and whys, I mean, there's a variety of reasons I chose not to run for the Senate, and you've hit the biggest one, is that there's too much gridlock. I can do more in a day here than frankly they do in a month down in Washington. And I mean that very sincerely. As a governor, you have the power to really listen to a story from a mom or a business, someone struggling to get veterans benefits, whatever it is, and really make an impact right there. Where's the barrier? Where did the system fail? How can I, as an executive, make quick decisions to fix that or move something through a legislative process or whatever it is? So there's an immense fulfillment in the ability to help your citizens as governor. You don't have that connection in Washington, and so that was one of the biggest things. Second, if I may, in all of our lives, especially leadership positions, you as a rabbi, me as a governor, there's a lot of scrutiny. Your family goes through a lot of scrutiny. And look, my family's gone through some really tough, unnecessary, unasked for burdens in terms of the public life that I live. And I thought, if I'm going to ask them to make that sacrifice, if I'm going to keep making that sacrifice, I'm darn well going to get something done. I'm not going to do it just to hold a job for 6 years. Someone said to me, I won't say who, there were a couple of U.S. senators, they said, Governor, won't this be amazing? You only have to get elected once every 6 years. And I said, that sounds like a nightmare. Because if I hate the job after the first year, I'm stuck there for another 5, right? But they think so differently.
Right.
And I thought, no, I thought I would be aligned. Like I'm pretty type A. I kind of go 120 miles an hour, and I try to be very positive. They go fairly slow, and there's a lot of negativity, and they don't get a lot done. So, it just wasn't my skill set, not my fit. My brother was a U.S. senator. I think he did a great job. He loves that policy and all of that. But that was also a very different time when you really could very easily. Joe Manchin wasn't this anomaly, right? I mean, Christine Sinema wasn't an anomaly. Working across the aisle was an everyday thing for most of them. So things have definitely changed down there. Governors I think are phenomenal. Republican and Democrat, I think they've done a great job during COVID. I think we've shown that, leadership can really impact people's lives in a positive way. It can be negative too, right? There's got to be that accountability. So that was really the driver in terms of wanting to stay. And look, if I'm going to be in this world, I want to make sure I'm actually getting something done for the citizens I represent, not just holding a job. And then on the political side, there was a lot of, well, you could be the 51st vote to bring back the Senate to Republicans, and that's not really a reason to sacrifice 6 years of your life. And I think Republicans are going to do very well this year anyway. So, all that's on the political side, that didn't really enter the equation. So at the end of the day, whether you're the head of a household or a rabbi or a governor or running a business, a leadership comes with scrutiny, and you're asked to make a lot of additional sacrifice there. So you got to get something done.
100%. One of the things that I saw that you got done, which is unfortunately somewhat of an anomaly in a lot of states, was that you directed a lot of attention towards mental health, addiction. Can you share with us what that looked like for your state?
Yeah. So, look, when I became governor in 2016, we had two things that really were hitting home. There was actually a third, but one was the opioid crisis. People know that New Hampshire was kind of tip of the spear on the opioid crisis. We led the nation with the number of fatalities that we were dealing with. And so when I came in, I had to kind of, if you will, blow up the system, and we can talk about that, and kind of rebuild a whole new system. And I ruffled a lot of feathers, and I was very nervous about it. I wasn't sure exactly if it was the right thing, but I really kind of took a lot of stakeholder input. But the other big crisis, other than opioids, was mental health. Now, opioids was on the front page. Mental health was the hidden crisis. And I still believe mental health is the hidden crisis of this country, because I don't know any family who isn't dealing with it at some level. I don't know any community who isn't dealing with it at some level. And so we took it head on. We didn't say we're going to nip around the edges. I brought in a group of about 20 people, private sector, public sector, stakeholders, families. Here's an example. I said, we're going to write a 10-year mental health plan. And so all my policy people at Health and Human Services said, okay, and they started taking their notes. I said, stop. You're not going to write it. The families are going to write it. They are the ones. And so we did a whole series of public meetings around our state, and I brought all the families in. I said, what is working and what isn't? Where did you need a service and it fell down? Where were your kids left behind? And by getting all that input, that's what effectively wrote our 10-year mental health plan. And it's been phenomenal because it's stakeholders, not policy wonks, right?
Right.
And that has really made a difference. And so what we've been able to do is, with that input, we've now focused investment. We're buying 2 new mental health hospitals. I just bought one specifically for children. We're putting mental health services in our schools. We're bringing in private providers from outside the state that had never been invited into the state before. We have emergency act teams. We're doing something this year that is so simple, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a game changer. I'm about to sign a piece of legislation where every student ID will have the New Hampshire mental health crisis hotline on the back. Every household is going to have the phone number that you should call. That one simple act costs nothing.
Right.
But that one simple act is going to allow the biggest barrier, which is, gee, I didn't think my family was going to have a mental health crisis. Somebody is really in need. What do I do now? And that's the hardest question to answer. That first step of access, of picking up the phone, of saying, I need help, or someone in my family needs help. And now everyone will have that phone number in their house on the back of a student ID. So simple, right? So simple, sometimes even simple things like that open that doorway of access. And I always say my job as governor is not to solve your problems. No. My job is to set up as many doors of opportunity for you and your family and your business, and then live free or die, right? That's a motto. Whatever door you want to go through, that's up to you. And so when crisis hits, I want all those doors of opportunity to be right there, easily accessible for whatever you, your family, your kids, whatever might need. And so in that sense, I think we're making huge progress here. I mean, we really are. And I think that by doing that, we're breaking down the stigma. Yeah, people don't want to talk about mental health crisis in their family, but we're saying it's okay.
Do you think that's one of the reasons that it's kind of put on the back burner sometimes? That
Without a doubt.
Not really talked about that. Even on a national level, we don't find that. I agree with you 100% that it is sort of like the silent killer. It's the silent problem that is not really getting the attention that it needs. Why? How do we fix it? I know you mentioned for your state. How do we broaden that to some other to the nation?
Well, especially during COVID, the mental health crisis, especially around kids, has been exacerbated. There's no doubt about that. And so, again, trying to really grab hold of it, I'd say that everyone is dealing with this, and if you're not, you may at some point and know that. And I think from a leadership perspective, we have to be willing to talk about it, to open those doors, to make it part of our everyday conversation, and not in a place of fear, but a place of opportunity and hope. And look what we're able to do. And we're gonna. My job is to help try to find that opportunity so you can solve your problem before you have the problem, right? Think a little bit proactively, a little, with that prevention mindset. And the more we do that as leaders, I think it opens up doors. People breathe. Sometimes you have conversations with folks. So let me back up. Our former Supreme Court justice, a Chief Justice, a guy named John Broderick in New Hampshire, a great guy. He had a mental health crisis in his family, and he goes to high schools and he talks about it very openly, about him, the relationship between him and his son and his wife and what their family went through and all of that. Kids will come up to him crying, just asking for a hug because they say, finally, someone is talking about this. Finally, I don't feel shame and embarrassment and someone isn't going to understand my issue. They're connecting with him. So I'll go around with him and he goes around on his own. And just by doing more and more and more of this, kids need that help. They feel like they are alone. I mean, that is really what the crisis is. It's disconnection. I have a problem. I'm dealing with drugs. I'm dealing with mental illness. As a kid, I don't feel like anyone's going to understand me, and they disconnect. By creating those opportunities of connection for these kids and these families, everything opens up. The conversation, the breaking down the stigma, the opportunities for investing in good programming. It's pretty exciting stuff, and senators don't do that. Congressmen don't do that. Governors get to do that.
Right.
That's really why I love the job,
I love it. And such a simple idea, like putting a phone number on the back of a student ID card is going to save lives. It's so simple, but that's huge. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I remember in our conversation last year, one of the things you mentioned to me, I also found it pretty intriguing because a lot of politicians, they like to talk about how connected they are with their religious faith, and they'll go to their house of worship and they'll make a public scene about it. But I remember you mentioned to me that you often find yourself on a regular basis just quietly either praying or meditating or contemplating. What does that look like for you? It's nice when it's also done in the privacy, not just for the cameras.
Yeah. So most of my family's Catholic, really. I grew up Catholic, and my kids are Catholic. I kind of practice more of I guess you'd say more of a broader Christianity. I have a lot of pastors that I'll meet with regularly or talk with, but I don't wear it on my sleeve like that. And maybe some people think I should. I don't know, but it's my journey, and I need faith to work for me. In this world, with all the negativity, it's got a ground. You need a grounding. And a big part of that is my faith. Now, if my faith is on display for everybody, it's no longer mine, right? So I need something that I know I can truly cling to in tough times. And I have to make tough decisions. I have to deal with tough stories and tough families. And I pray on some of the decisions I have to make a lot. COVID, there was a lot of praying during COVID. I mean, there really was. But so I keep it a little closer, but it is so integral. And I do that, if anything, because it's so integral in terms of what I do. And for me, it's about staying positive, right? So many individuals get pulled down this rabbit hole of ugly negativity in my world. And you get sucked down that rabbit hole, you ain't coming back sometimes. And I'm not going to let that happen to me, because I think I have a bigger responsibility to my citizens in terms of not putting on just the rose-colored glasses, everything is great, but saying, look, we can take these challenges head on, and we can do it in a positive way. We can do it collaboratively. And I don't care what political party you're from. You got a good idea, throw it on the table. Let's get it done. My faith is what helps me keep very positive. And people say, boy, how do you stay so positive in this? It's not easy. It's not by accident. It's a lot of hard work. But I can tell you, it's faith. And it really is. There's a lot of prayer. Some Old Testament for me, some Old Testament, some New. But I find different passages here and there. Like I said, I have a couple pastors that will send me stuff on a daily basis in the morning. I do a morning prayer in the morning, and some of it's pretty good. Sometimes I'll pick up the phone. I got a couple pastors I'll call, and I'll say, sometimes they send me stuff, I don't get it. You ever do that? I mean, you're a rabbi, you get most of this. But sometimes I'll read something and I'm like, I don't know where this is taking me. And so I'll pick up the phone early and for the 5:30 a.m. call. Hey, Michael, I'm sorry to bug you. What does this mean that you just sent me? And he'll walk me through it a little bit. But it is important to me. And it's so easy just to let that become not a priority, right? I'm going to let all of my work and my family and everything else become a priority first. But when you work hard at it, two things happen. It keeps me very positive, and it keeps me much more grounded to my family. And family's everything. I mean, if you're not grounded to your family, something's really wrong, frankly. And you got to find a way to do that, because I know a lot of folks, they've lost, or for whatever reason, they're not connected to their biological immediate family, but they found a family somewhere else, right? Your squad, your crew, whatever you want to call it, your family, your tribe. Use whatever word you want to use. But you got to have that one-on-one, person-to-person connection with folks that you can just pick up the phone to. And again, my faith really helps remind me that that's what it's all about, right? The very simple thing, love thy neighbor, right? And the 10 Commandments and all of that. You got to make sure that those words are real. And the last thing I want to say is, how do we practice that? Like I say, every morning I can read it, I can pray on it, but am I doing things throughout my day to practice that? Am I doing things to practice connection and empathy? Am I doing things to practice and emulate that? I have fourth graders that will come into the State House all the time and do a tour. And before I always love to visit with them, and I ask them questions. They ask the craziest and most wonderful questions for me. But one thing I always try to do is say, okay, I'm not there to proselytize to them about Christianity or anything like that. But what am I doing, and what do I have in my faith, in my back pocket, that is going to help me practice that connection with them, and emulate a good example to them that hopefully they can take beyond it. And if you get good at it, you can do it in a kind of subtle, indirect way where you're planting some good seeds, and it just gets you excited to know, well, I'm not sure what we planted there, but something good's going to come from it.
One last question. You said, you always like to ask yourself, and I like that. You like to ask yourself, okay, I learned this. How am I going to practically implement that? What are some of the ways that you see that faith can be used to help guide or perhaps fix some of the issues that we have in our society?
So I don't mean to be so simple about it, but the first most important thing to do is listen. But the reason I start there is when you're listening to someone, you're connecting with them, and you're taking the time to understand what their needs are. And at the end of the day, that's what the grounding of my faith is. What are the individual's needs? How do I appreciate that this job is a lot bigger than me? It's so much bigger than ourselves. And for me, it's the 1.4 million people I represent. And if I'm starting by listening, I'm doing two things. I'm realizing what their issues are, but I'm taking time in the process of listening to say, okay, what are their needs? Not just their funding needs, their policy needs, but what are their emotional needs? What are their connection needs? Where has not just the system not worked for them, but where do they not have connectivity in their everyday lives? And again, my job isn't to say, well, you need to go to church more, you need to go to the synagogue more, or anything like that, but to help them find better connections at a community level, not just the state level, but at a local community level that I know they can build on with their own journey. Just like I said, my job isn't to solve everyone's problems, but to create doors of opportunity. I think the same works with faith. My job isn't to tell you what your path of faith should be. My job is to hopefully open your eyes up to the opportunities that exist in your local community to find that connectivity. The lack of connectivity with humans right now, because of social media and politics and all these things that want to divide us, these evil forces that want to pull us apart, that disconnection is the biggest battle that we have to overcome. And by creating that connectivity, we get more grounded to our community, our families, our faith, and that whole idea that, what are we doing for the next person, right? How are we paying things forward? How are we opening ourselves up to emulate a better example for others, right? And that's what God wants. That's exactly what he wants. I mean, it's not just, well, I love thy neighbor and, I love everyone and we're all happy. Let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Look, that sounds wonderful. But the reality is it's not really how we live our everyday lives, and it's not practical to live that way. So how do we at least connect? And even though the guy the guy I'm connected to, I might have some issues with, or we might have disagreements with, or we might be on the other side of something with, that's okay. We're connected first. And I really think, for me, faith is about that connectivity and bringing that back into our lives more than anything, and especially with the next generation. I'm 47. I still consider myself pretty young. Not really, but the next generation and the generation after that, that's where they are missing the boat the most. And you wonder where religion and faith is going with those generations. I think it's still a little bit to be unwritten. But I think the connectivity piece is very, very important. And you connect first by listening, second by, opening the doors and pathways for them in their community, and just being a resource. And sometimes the most connected, faith-driven thing you can do for someone is just picking up the phone and listening and saying, "How are you?" Man, that can be everything to some folks. That can be that sunrise that people just haven't seen in a long time. It's hard to do as governor. I can't call 1.4 million people every day and say, "How you doing?" I get it. But you know what? Even if you're just doing a couple a day, it can make all the difference in the world. It really can. So we all just have to kind of do our part. We all have personal responsibilities, but we have to do our part to kind of make not just the world a better place, but make it a better place for the next person in front and behind us. So, I guess those are the parts of the job I love the most.
I love it. One of the things that was always intriguing to me in the Jewish community from the Torah vantage point is Judaism is not a my way or the highway type of religion. We don't seek out converts. It's not something that's part of our worldview. And one of the reasons is because we believe that God has sort of a plan for all of mankind, and that mankind as a whole, our job, our primary focus is settling the world and creating a moral society. And I just want to thank you for your leadership and in encouraging and helping facilitate in your corner of the world that society of morality and creating a little bit more of an upliftment and improvement in the state of New Hampshire, and connecting it with God, with good values, and thanks so much for being with us here today.
You bet. I hope we can do it again. Give me a call. I'd love to do this again. It's very cathartic for me. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love hearing the questions, and it allows me to think a little differently and challenge myself a little bit. But this has been a lot of fun. Anytime. Would love to come on again.
Absolutely. And I'd love to have you back. And I do hope to see you when we're up in New Hampshire this summer with the family. Hope to meet up.
You bet. Just give me a call. You got my cell number. Give me a call. We'll definitely catch up.
All right. Thanks so much, Governor. Chris Sununu, everybody.
Guys. We'll see you. Thank you.
All the best. Thanks so much.
You bet.